Thank you to the Social Law Library for recognizing the importance of the content that we're going to share with you today. And we're looking forward to actually continuing these programs with additional programming on different topics that touch upon well-being in the profession. So thanks everyone for being here. I'm looking at the attendees list, and I know a number of you, so appreciate folks dropping in, and definitely appreciate people chiming in on the chat, and also the Q&A if you'd like to comment, or if you have any questions. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to share my slides first. And I'm going to start here, and I just warn you that we're gonna start with maybe some depressing material, but as always, I think none of us would be here doing this work and talking about this material if we weren't optimistic about change that is happening in the profession, and how we are going to we are working to improve things and help attorneys really thrive in the profession. So this was actually a recent article in the Washington Post that gained some attention. I guess not so recent. It was this past year, and this is the title: the happiest, least stressful, most meaningful jobs in America. And as you may guess, well, it is not being a lawyer. There was so this article was based on an analysis that was conducted in the Washington Post of data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. And they in fact found that the most stressful occupation is being a lawyer. And so this article then was followed by other articles, including this article here, which was an opinion piece. And of course, the title here: "Want to be happy? Then don't be a lawyer." And no, we recognize not everyone is miserable practicing law, and many of us are very happy and rewarded with what we are doing. But we also recognize that this is a very challenging profession, and that there are things that we need to do for ourselves. There are things that we need to do for others, colleagues, staff in the workplace, that can help everyone thrive. So I want to begin here by talking and sharing some data that was released just this past year on lawyers, specifically in Massachusetts, just to kind of drive home some of the challenges and the problem that is presented, and then we'll talk more about what we can do about this. And so this was a study that was conducted on all lawyers in Massachusetts. The results are actually from a weighted sample of almost 5,000 lawyers. So it was actually a very high participation rate. This was conducted by a professional research group, and for those of you who have participated in this, thank you for doing so. Definitely very helpful to have as many people participate as possible, and we were happy to have the results we did. And so there were a number of questions that were asked in this particular survey, and this is probably the highest level, sort of highlight the real takeaway here is that lawyers in Massachusetts report being burned out of the profession at high rates. And so you can see here, 77% of lawyers in Massachusetts reporting burnout, also reporting high levels of anxiety, depression, unhealthy alcohol use, suicide ideation. Nearly half of them considering leaving an employer, or considering leaving the profession altogether. What's interesting here, and we've had lots of conversations about this in the past year, is that what seems to coexist with this burnout is that many lawyers actually feel satisfied with their lives on a whole. So, to me, what that says is there's something about the profession. And so, we really need to think about these changes to the profession and what we can do to help make things better. So that's one of the high level findings. Now, one of the things that this survey looked into in particular was the differences in certain populations. And so we know from data in Massachusetts, we have not a very, very diverse bar. We are working on increasing diversity, which is important for so many reasons. But what this particular study found is that burnout is higher among lawyers who have been historically underrepresented in the profession, and marginalized in both the profession and the community at large. And so you can see that data here where we've got these bars trending upwards, and then in terms of satisfaction with life, less satisfaction with life as compared to white lawyers. So, these are other things that we need to definitely take into consideration and sort of thinking about our the different demographics in our profession and and what we can do to make sure that we are retaining diverse attorneys in our profession. And so, so higher levels, both in terms of race and ethnicity, burnout, and then we also have higher levels of burnout, anxiety, depression, less satisfaction with life. Also for folks with who are not white heterosexual attorneys. So we have folks who are are women or identify as non-binary or trans, and then we have attorneys who identify as LGBTQ, and those attorneys are also reporting sort of not more dissatisfaction with life, and then also higher levels of burnout, anxiety, depression. Again, really important for if we're hoping to increase the diversity of our profession, we really need to be attuned to these particular populations as well. So that brings me, after talking about kind of the high level here, where we're starting off, to introduce our speakers today, and I am very, very pleased to introduce two wonderful people who are joining me today to talk about their own experiences and the work that they are doing around increasing well-being and improving the culture and the profession. And so the first person I'd like to introduce is Mala Rafiq, who is a partner at Rosenfeld and Rafiq, and Mala is also the current co-chair of the SJC Standing Committee on Lawyer Wellbeing. And also, I'd like to introduce Kendra Berardi, who is a partner at Robinson Cole. Kendra has been involved with the SJC's Standing Advisory Committee on Professionalism for a number of years, and I know does some great work at her own firm around improving the culture. So happy to have both of you here. And I just want to give each of you a moment to maybe say something else about yourself and your practice before we move on. So Mala, do you want to start with
Sure.
you?
So hi, everyone. I run a small firm. There's 7 of us, and we range in age. And I think at this point, I'm almost the oldest. And I've been practicing for 25 years, and we do health and disability law. And we're trying to run our firm now in a way since COVID that is completely remote and with flexible work hours that I'll talk a little bit more about during today's program.
Excellent. Thanks, Mala. Kendra.
As Heidi said, I'm Kendra Berardi. I'm a partner at Robinson & Cole in Boston. My practice is predominantly complex commercial litigation and real estate litigation. I've been with Robinson & Cole for 12 years, almost 13 years, even though it feels like 5 minutes. And I'm really happy to be part of this conversation because I think we're at a little bit of a a pressure point in terms of our conversation about lawyer well-being in Massachusetts. And I'm glad to see it getting so much attention. I hope we can keep that momentum up with conversations like this.
Thank you. Thanks, Kendra. Thanks, Mala. So that brings us actually to our first sort of discussion piece here, and we have a few different questions, and these came out of some of the discussions that Kendra, Mala, and I have had, and also thinking about you know where what do we need to be thinking about around well-being and the challenges in the profession, and so. I'm hoping folks here also will contemplate these questions as we are talking through them. And if you have, you know, comments and anything that you would like to share from your own experiences, please do feel free to drop those in the chat. We would love that. And so, you know, a couple of questions to start off with, and Kendra, Mala, feel free to jump in. But you know, in thinking about the data that I just presented, and thinking about how this impacts you and your work and your workplaces, you know, does this resonate with you? And you know, we can kind of start from the top here. You know, have you experienced burnout in the past? Are you aware of staff, colleagues? Like, how has that sort of presented itself? And then, you know, and then thinking about what type of challenges are presented to you on a daily basis. So, and then I think we can hit the last question at the end in terms of different strategies to hopefully keep burnout at bay. So, Mala, do you want to start things off?
Sure.
Okay.
So, thanks, Heidi. So when I told people I was speaking at this today, they asked me if I was speaking on how to achieve burnout. I am very good at that. And I know exactly how to stay just an hour later, or maybe just work this weekend, and I'll get caught up this weekend and everything will be fine. I'm a master at that. But here's what I've learned in the past couple of years. The few things that contribute the most to burnout for me is email. You know, it's the constant accessibility, the phone ringing, the 400 emails a day, the internal need, the feeling that I have to respond, and I have to respond immediately, and I'm going to get into trouble if I don't, or if I don't respond, I'm going to lose this client. And then it's that sort of combined with I need to bring in money to keep our firm afloat and to make sure that I can support these people that are here. And then overlay over that is just professionalism, or what we've come to talk about as professionalism. People just being jerks, you know, and every single day there's a little bit of that. And I think the closest I came to leaving the profession, and I love this profession. I love practicing law. I love what I do. But the closest I came was the summer of 2022, when I was just beat up on by an opposing counsel all summer long, and I was so miserable. So it's really, I think, the combination of those three things for me, at least as a small firm owner and as a woman. And I think a woman, it's easier. It was easier to take advantage of me that summer for a variety of reasons. But yeah, I think those are my biggest challenges. Like, Kendra, what do you think?
Yeah, you've hit on some points that sound so familiar to me, Mala. And you know, and one of them that I want to comment on, which is this idea that I think we're all always just a few bad experiences away from burnout, which feels insurmountable. Which is to say that the inherent nature of our job means that we are sometimes going to suffer defeats. And whether those defeats look like literally losing an argument or a case or a motion or a transaction falling apart or a deal not going through, or if the defeat is just being treated terribly by an adversary over and over again, if we're not conscious all the time of our sort of baseline level of well-being, and we're too close to the edge, then those defeats, which are inevitable and can't be changed given the nature of what we do, can have real and serious consequences about people's ability or desire to stay in the profession. And I think one of the things that you said, Mala, which I want to touch on, because I think it's a real issue that's difficult to see if you're not in it, which is that I find that personally, the times I'm most susceptible to burnout, which feels uncontrollable, or sort of negativity. I mean, I'll sort of lump burnout and negativity about the profession in the same category here, is in circumstances where I am for a period of time I am the other in some way, which for me as a white heterosexual cisgendered woman is just the woman part, right? And so I just have one of these categories. But I find that when I am on a file and I'm the only woman in the room, I'm the only woman on the file, I'm the only mom, and even if the other lawyers have children, they are dads. It's a different universe, and the types of things that I'm juggling mean that I'm using bandwidth and mental energy that I might otherwise be using on just the lawyer parts of my job in sustaining my connection to and what I believe to be my space within the group in which I am the other, right? It's like, this is a silly example in a lot of ways, but I recently had a trial in a jurisdiction that I don't practice in, another state. It's a judge I'm not familiar with. It's a state that I understand to be significantly more conservative in terms of its judiciary. And the night before trial started, I'm emailing a partner at our local counsel's office to say, is this judge going to expect that if I'm in a skirt suit, I'm also wearing nylons, right? Because it's 107 degrees here, but I can't start off a case looking a way that this person feels is unprofessional, right? And not a single one of my male colleagues was concerned about their outfit or their shoes. And that's just, it's this additional thing that they weren't thinking about that, but that is absolutely adding to my mental burden. It's adding to my likelihood of burnout. It's adding to my undercurrent of concern that I will make a mistake, having nothing to do with my ability to be an effective advocate or a good lawyer, but which nevertheless could impact my client.
Or not being taken seriously, right? Because of the way you're dressed or the way you look, or, I realized that when I was talking about last summer, I was clenching my fist so much that I dug my nails into my palms. Like these unconscious reactions that we have, usually I feed the anxiety with food and I don't even realize until, I've eaten everything in sight and in the office, or I've gained so much weight that I've compromised my health. But I think that a lot of the problem is the lack of awareness of what you're doing. So you go through a day and you've responded to 100 emails and you've had, a bunch of people just be not so nice, or you've had that one interaction with a lawyer and you don't realize you haven't checked in with yourself during the day to see how you feel and how you've reacted. And you lose sight of yourself somewhere in there. And then 4 months have passed and 5 months have passed and your depression is horrible, or your anxiety is horrible, or you're self-medicating through food or alcohol or drugs. This is what, because we don't stop to think. And I I've said to Heidi that I don't love the phrase well-being because it somehow has taken on this negative connotation. But what I think it really means, and it means different things to different people, but what I think it means is just checking in with yourself and figuring out what works for you and what is going on that's affecting your health and your overall happiness. But sorry, Heidi, I didn't mean to keep talking.
No,
I'm happy to listen to you talk, and I'm sure everyone else is as well. So, I think you both raised some really really great points, and in particular in terms of the inherent challenges of this profession and things that you see on a day-to-day basis. So, so let's take that last question, and in particular, sort of thinking about that last question related to some of those specific situations that you talked about. Mala, you talked about having this experience where you felt like you were really beat up on by another attorney. How do you deal with that, right? How do you deal with that so that you can come back and not burn out and continue that work? What were some strategies and sort of resources that you were able to utilize?
So I think the biggest one was talking about it, and talking about it with other lawyers. And, it seems like such a simple thing, but it's huge. And I will say on this, I think on this Zoom is Rhonda Maloney, who's the current chair of the Mass Academy of Trial Lawyers. And that the trial lawyers feel this all the time. So reaching out to some of those lawyers who've talked about this and talking to them about how they dealt with it, or just telling them how you felt and hearing people say, you know what, you're not alone, made a huge difference to me. Also, I made it a point when I got off the phone with him, it was almost automatic. I did it without thinking. I would head to our little kitchen and open the refrigerator door and find something to eat. So I would, the minute I hung up the phone, I made it a point to grab my dog and go for a walk. That was just a different way of reacting to it. And then that just became a habit. And I realized, I didn't try to harm myself, which food, has always been a form of harming myself. And I'm starting to do something a little bit more positive. But there isn't a lawyer in this group, in this community, that hasn't experienced that. So talking about it and making it okay to talk about losing, making it okay to talk about being beat up on is really, really important, I think.
How about you, Kendra?
Yeah, I hate to be sort of the Me Too panelist here, but I was thinking about my answer to that question when you were asking Mala, Heidi, and I was literally thinking like, oh, well, for me, it would be talking about it. And so I don't want to sort of piggyback too much. The one thing I want to add is that for me, talking about it is hard sometimes, because I think for me, and I don't know, certainly this is not everybody's experience, but there's this inherent personal shame I feel about having to tell a colleague or a friend or both that I trust and admire and respect, this person thinks that I'm bad at my job, or this person thinks I'm a bad lawyer, they think I'm a bad person, and they're treating me badly. And for me, it's sort of twofold. One, it feels, even though I know it's not true intellectually, that voicing that is making it true. And two, it feels like a defeat for me to admit to another person that that's getting to me. Mm-hmm. And what I've learned over the course of 12, 13 years in private practice is that makes it 1,000 times worse, because the first thing that your colleagues always will say to you when you share it is, well, that person is bananas, right? And that is not you, and you shouldn't listen to it. And we, this is how I would deal with it. And can I, and I think you're fantastic. And it's always true for me that the release of sharing that information makes me feel better, because someone else calling out the absurdity of what you're facing is helpful. And it also just always makes me feel like, okay, I'm actually not alone. I'm alone in this interaction with this person who's treating me terribly, but I'm not alone here in this environment, and this person is here and they can come to me. And so that's been a personal challenge for me to kind of deal with my own internal voice saying, like, don't talk about it, just sort of mumble through. And I think it's one of the things that I try to tell young lawyers a lot is, don't let this fear of a stigma of someone who isn't worth your time telling you that you're bad at your job stop you from sharing the weight of difficult days, which you will have in this profession, with people that you trust and respect and can help you sort of navigate those circumstances.
Yeah, so I think these messages are going to actually come back up in a moment as we talk through more of the data. So I want to shift just a bit, and actually, well, it sort of goes along with this idea that we're not alone in this. We are not alone as a profession in the challenges that we are facing in the workplace. And in fact, the U.S. Surgeon General just this past year released a framework on workplace well-being and sort of has prioritized workplace well-being because we spend probably more than half our lives at work. And so the Surgeon General in this document really has acknowledged that workplaces have this responsibility for the well-being of their workforces. And you can see here with this quote that healthier workforces lead to thriving organizations and healthier communities. And so it's good for everyone, right? If we're healthier, happier at work, it's going to be good for everyone. It's not only going to be helpful for our businesses and serving our clients, but also it's going to be better for everyone. So this is a really interesting framework, and I recommend it to people, and particularly folks who are the leaders and managers in the workplace. There's actually some great assessments in there as well. So this is a really great resource. And then I just want to just note here that like I said earlier, we're optimistic about changes and improvements in the profession, and I really do believe that there is this movement underway, and you can kind of see some of the history here where we've had lawyer assistance programs around for a long time. Lawyer assistance programs being programs that help lawyers in many, many different ways. And we have a fantastic one, and I have a slide on that in a moment, Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers in Massachusetts, that provides a number of different free and confidential resources. But really, these programs were founded on the idea that people were getting in trouble for certain issues, and so we had to then, if people got in trouble, well, we had to sort of help them out of that. And so we're now moving into kind of a different space, a more sort of proactive, preventative space. And we've had some major studies on well-being of the profession. We had a national task force that put out a report with lots of different recommendations. One of those recommendations being to the states, individual states looking at these issues inside their own states. And we have lots of states that have now taken action. Of course, in Massachusetts, we are one of them, with a permanent standing committee that's addressing these issues. And of course, none of this work happens in a vacuum. We have lots and lots of partners and stakeholders, and all of you really as ambassadors to this work, because it wouldn't happen without that. And then we have also on the national level, we have work that is also happening. And that's really just to demonstrate that leaders in this profession really do care about this and are trying to drive changes. And like I said, a lot of the work here now is we're moving from being reactive to problems that we have seen and more proactive. And we're also piecing together sort of individual strategies like Kendra and Mala have been talking about. What are things that we can do ourselves, like setting boundaries, creating good habits, but also how do we change these structures, these bigger structures? And so that's some of the work that is certainly happening with the SJC Standing Committee on Lawyer Wellbeing. And so going back to the data and thinking about why exactly do we need to be proactive in this work that we're doing? Well, here is one reason, and this is data again from this most recent study. The study found that more than half of, or actually almost half of lawyers who in this study screened for depression, anxiety, or suicide ideation didn't actually go out and seek mental health care. And that's different from actually receiving it, because of the people who actually sought out mental health care, they did receive it. So there's not that barrier. But there's some barrier related to actually going out and seeking that help. And so this is a huge concern, right? Because then we're not getting to people before it's too late. And the same is true with substance use, although more so in this study, there were folks who screened for hazardous or unhealthy alcohol use, and 98% did not seek out substance use care. So again, it's not that they didn't receive it if they sought it, but it's that they didn't even seek it. And so that's a real cause for concern, and certainly is one of the top reasons why we are here today talking about this topic. And so The study also asked the question, and tried to sort of hone in on why is it, right? Why is it that people are not seeking care? And so here's some data on that. There were a couple of questions that were asked. Stigma, of course, rose to the forefront. It was the primary reason as to why people are not seeking out care. And then also, of course, time, punitive concerns like a loss of a license, loss of employment at cost was less of a concern. So, in thinking about that data and in particular stigma, and Kendra, you mentioned stigma actually earlier. What can we do? How can we help? How can we help ourselves? How can we help other people to actually get the help that they need if they're in a challenging situation, so that it doesn't go so far, right? So that, that next defeat, like you talked about, Kendra, kind of pushes you over the edge. And I'm thinking about this, both in terms of like what we tell ourselves, but also in terms of like, you see a colleague, right, who's struggling, how do you talk to them? Do you intervene? What are things that you can do to help other folks as well? So I will punt that over to the two of you, whoever would like to start there.
Kendra, go for it. You start this time. And I can be the me too.
Okay. Well, I'm going to me too myself here, in the sense that I think one of the first things we do to reduce stigma is that we talk about it, right? We talk about it. And I think this goes hand in hand with the third bullet point here, which is what can you do as a leader or manager? There's a big delta between, as a leader or manager, sort of giving lip service to the idea of lawyer well-being and saying, we have this program or we have this, and then not talking about it and not sharing your own experience with sort of what you do to maintain your own well-being and mental health, and not talking about or acknowledging that you have your own challenges. Because some of the things that were I like to still consider myself a young lawyer, even though I know that probably the profession does not. One of the things that was most helpful to me as, a very young lawyer, was hearing from lawyers who I respected, who I, as a young lawyer, looked at and went, well, this person's never had a bad day or something which knocked them off their game in their entire career. And the power that comes from hearing from that person, like, oh no, child, I've had many days that knocked me off my game, and here's what that looked like, and here's how I had to claw my way back, and here's how I did it, and here's how it was hard, and then it happened again, the following Tuesday. There's no way to replicate the value of that kind of conversation, because you have completely shifted the perspective of a younger lawyer to say, you think I have this all figured out? None of us has this figured out. Not a single one of them one of us has this figured out. It looks like this, and it's okay that it looks like this. And it's all the more important that you now, early in your career, develop what are going to look like your coping mechanisms. And one of the things that I think we need to do, and I know, Molly, you touched on this, is we need a better vocabulary for this, because to a lot of people, when you say something like, well, it's a focus on well-being, there's its own stigmas attached to that. And one of the things I always say to some of my young colleagues is, like, you would not expect any high performance anything to function well without maintenance and regular checks. And if you're not doing that for yourself, and you're not putting yourself in an environment that values those things, you are not going to function at the top of your game. I say all the time to my husband, this is kind of like, for me, I think about it like a baseline concussion protocol. I know what firing on all cylinders looks like for me when I feel, the least amount of stress that you can ever have in this profession. I feel like things are under control. I know what that feels like. And if I try to sort of periodically check in with myself, particularly after difficult experiences or days, to say, like, okay, how far away am I from this baseline protocol? What does it look like? And what do I need to do to get back there? And sometimes even just acknowledging that it's not going to happen today. Today is going to be an off-kilter day, and we'll try again tomorrow, is a humongous tool in sort of navigating the ebbs and flows of this profession.
So definitely me tooing you, everything you just said, or dittoing it or whatever. I will also just add that, I'm very open about the fact that I'm in therapy. I've suffered from anxiety my entire life. Everyone knows that from 9 to 10 on Monday mornings here, I'm on Zoom therapy. So we talk about it, but I think then we also take it one step further, and we have brought in pretty regularly, Sean Healy from Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers, or other people, other therapists to come in and talk to us just over lunch about compassion fatigue, or dealing with difficult clients, strategies to address your own anxiety. So I think it's talking about it, but then taking it one step further and acting on it. So there are a lot of people here that may not access mental health treatment, just because, for all the reasons Heidi's already pointed out, but also because they come from families or environments where this was never an option. It was a sign of weakness. So by bringing in someone and making it part of the work environment or part of a lunch, it sort of fosters that conversation that might otherwise not happen. And it's been, I found that the people that seem to be the most closed are the people who talk the most in that environment, and then maybe follow up with whomever comes in. So I really think that as leaders in this profession, it's incumbent upon us to make this a priority, and you make it a priority both by acting it, talking about it as a leader, but also ensuring. I think health insurance coverage with mental health care is the single most important thing you can do as an employer. So our second biggest expense other than salaries is health insurance, and it's comprehensive health insurance. And that is a value that this firm has run on since its inception. And I think you need to make those decisions as a firm at what your values are, and what you want to put, what you want to focus on. And we always talk about the client experience, and we never, ever talk about the employee experience. And so maybe just ask the people you work with what they want and what will make them happy. And what are they suffering with, and what are they struggling with? They don't have to talk to you, but just make yourself available to have those conversations.
Yeah, and I think that in this work, a lot of a lot of people share stories with me about their own experiences, and how someone's story may have impacted them. So I hear a lot of these anecdotes. And two just that I wanted to share. One, in terms of the importance of sharing experiences, talking about these things and their impact, is last year we were engaged with a number of the different bar associations with their executive committees. And one particular bar association, when we went to the executive committee, and we talked about well-being and awareness and importance. And the president of that bar association came forward, and for the first time in his professional life and personal life, actually talked about his challenges with mental health over the years. And he had never spoken to any other attorneys. And by the way, I do have his consent to talk about this. And he had so many people, after that, come up to him and ask him about his experiences. He had people come up and ask him how they could connect with a mental health clinician, ask him, how he got through things. And so it was really just a very, just an unbelievable experience, and just kind of proves again, the importance of sharing experiences and stories, and sort of letting down that facade that we all hold up as lawyers. And then the second one I'll share, which actually just happened yesterday. We go out and talk to a lot of the law students, because of course we want to be talking to attorneys, very, very early in their careers. And just yesterday we had a speaker who was talking to law students about their being in recovery from alcohol. And this was during a 1L orientation, and there were multiple people who then raised their hand in a sea of students, all these 1Ls during their orientation, the first couple of weeks, raised their hand and said, I'm in recovery too. I would love to find some resources around here. And you could just see like it just kind of opened the door, right? And that's a really amazing experience. So I think again, the recognizing the importance of actually sharing experiences, extremely important. There was a couple other things that both of you touched upon that relates again sort of back to this data, which is with regards to the workplace. And so I talked previously about the Surgeon General's framework and the importance and responsibility of workplaces and leaders in terms of having a responsibility for their own workers' health and well-being. And so we can think about this in terms of having a supportive workplace, and what are those factors that contribute to a supportive workplace that allows you to function at your highest, right, as Kendra talked about. And so the study actually did look at a number of different factors, including being treated with kindness and respect, having a positive supervisor relationship, having supportive colleagues, having flexibility, time to recharge, access to mentorship, and opportunities for promotion. And of course, I don't think anyone's going to be surprised that having a supportive work environment, so when people reported that they had a supportive work environment, it was associated with lower rates of burnout, anxiety, depression, and a greater satisfaction with life. And you can see that here on this slide. And then again, sort of thinking again about how these things impact different populations. The study also found that the general trend is that certain groups were less likely to have supportive work environments. And so you can see here sort of across the board for diverse populations, the supportive work environment is a lot lower than those compared to them. So again, something to really keep in mind as we're thinking about well-being and well-being for everyone. The other part of this too, and this came up earlier, Mala was talking a bit about civility and how people treat each other, right? And so the study also looked at the prevalence of bias, harassment, and discrimination in the profession, where that's happening, and the impact of those issues. And so you can see here that the lawyers who most frequently reported experiencing bias, harassment, or discrimination, well, where were they reporting it from? They were reporting having that from other attorneys, okay? So experiencing that from other attorneys, experiencing that in their own places of employment, also in the courts. So that's one that we've talked about a lot. And then, of course, we want to tie this to your own health and well-being, right? So that's why we're talking about this. How does this impact, right, your well-being? Well, obviously not great. So again, we now have this data that really shows this empirical connection between experiencing bias, harassment, discrimination, and also vicarious trauma and its impact on well-being. Higher rates of burnout, higher rates of anxiety, depression, and a lower satisfaction with life. And then finally, before we get to our discussion piece, is of course, thinking again about different populations and demographics. And as you can see here, the bias, harassment, discrimination, vicarious trauma was reported to be more common among groups that have been underrepresented and marginalized in the profession, particularly female, not heterosexual, Asian, Black, African American, Hispanic, Latino, those who identify with a disability. And then also two other interesting groups that fall in this category are those who younger attorneys and also attorneys with fair to poor health. So let's unpack some of this, and I know it's a lot. We could do a whole program on just this piece, but and I know we do have a question in here as well that I want to get to, and maybe we can uh, weave that into this as well. But thinking about how can we improve workplace culture, and I'm thinking about that from the perspective of individual lawyers, right? And also as lawyers who are leaders in the profession or leaders in our own workplaces, managers. What are things that we can do to make improvements to workplace culture? So I will
Well,
punt
I'll
that
start
big
with
one
this.
to both of you.
Well, I'll start with a small firm, and then maybe Kendra, you can talk about it in your environment.
Sure.
So there's, I think, three things that we have done. Two of them since COVID, and one has always been a value of the firm. And I really can talk about it as a value. So the value is that we've never had a billable hour requirement, nor have we ever linked income to billables. It's just never been something that we've ever focused on. And I think that has gone a long way towards building a culture here where people don't feel like their well-being is tied to having their income and their financial security, and also their success at work. As long as we are tying money and income or billable hours we're never gonna get to well-being. So that's the first and biggest one. I think that's easier to do on a small firm level because you can just make that decision and make that choice. The second thing we've done is we're fully remote because that's what people want. We have an office that people can come into, but I asked people and they wanted to work from home. And the third is that we're a fluid workplace. So we don't work 9 to 5. A lot of people here are parents, and they want to spend half the day with their kids, so they can spend half the day with their kids. I don't really care when you work, as long as you just get what's done. So those are the three sort of workplace culture changes that we have, or values that we have, that have worked really well, I think, to building a good workplace culture here. Kendra, that you have a different type of a firm, so it'd be interesting to hear.
Yeah,
thoughts.
we do. I mean, it's I think all of that sounds amazing, Mala, and I I think your employees are very lucky. We're a firm of over 250 lawyers. We're spread out over a number of geographies. And we are not able, in the current sort of environment and what's expected of big firms, to implement all of those things. That said, and I know that Heidi had an opportunity to listen to our current managing partner talk about some of the efforts we're trying to make within our sphere, in our lane of sort of larger mid-sized to big law. I see that your dog has just left Heidi, and so obviously he does not care about this part of my presentation. He's a small firm dog. We are never going to avoid the billable hour. At least I don't think during the course of my career. I don't think that will change. Although I do think that our firm and many other firms our size are trying to embrace an AFA model with customers or with clients. And so, who knows? The impact of alternative fee arrangements on the billable hour remains to be seen. And I know that there's this question in the chat about how do you deal with the billable hour requirement? And the reality is it exists. Our billable hour requirement for associates is $1,800 a year. And one of the things that we say to our associates, and we really try to stand by this, is it's a true $1,800. We're not a firm that says it's an $1,800 billable hour requirement, but then your bonus is nothing unless you actually go over 2,000. It's really $1,800, and we allow our attorneys to count pro bono hours towards that minimum. We don't put a cap on the number of pro bono hours that can count towards that minimum, and so we try to be conscious of it, but we can't remove it entirely, right? One of the things that we learned through COVID, just like your firm, Mala, is people don't want to be in the office 5 days a week. They were very effective at doing their jobs when we had to work from home. Everybody got a lot of time back. I walk to work, it takes 10 minutes, but I know that my colleagues who have commutes of an hour each way looked at this and went, okay, so I can work an hour more every day and still get back an hour of personal time if I can work here from my house. And so while we're not fully remote, because it is harder, I think, the larger you are to maintain a cohesive firm, if you're never in the office, our requirement is 2 days a week, and it's the attorney's choice. And no one is enforcing that with such an iron fist that it couldn't be like, listen, over the course of several weeks, we really want you to be averaging 2 days a week. Everybody understands that that will change. And I think that's one of the ways that certainly I have, and I know some of my colleagues have tried to kind of marry the requirements of the billable hour with things that you need to do in your personal life that have nothing to do with your job, which is that if my son has a doctor's appointment, or I have a doctor's appointment, or no one went grocery shopping over the weekend, then I will probably work from home on Monday, right? So that I can do those things. I can have groceries delivered. I can get to my doctor's appointment without having to get out of the office, which we all know is like a marathon of us, getting from like my office to the front door is like a Ninja Warrior obstacle course. And so, and if you work from home, no one's sort of like, especially if you're newer in your career, no one's going like, oh, you leaving? Because they don't know. And one of the things I also tell associates to do is like block that time off on your calendar and make it private so that no one can see why you're there. They just know you're busy. So no one's going to schedule a call during that time because they know you're not available. And they don't know that it's a doctor's appointment, or you're walking your dog, or you're going for a 15-minute walk because you just need to be away from the computer. And then one of the other things that we've implemented, which I think over the long term will have a bigger impact, is that we now have a separate committee on lawyer well-being here at the firm. And so that has joined our sort of roster of committees, along with our DE&I committee, our women's committee, our pro bono committee, our practice development committee. And they are very active committee. It's chaired by two partners here at the firm. Their content really and interaction with the lawyers and staff, this is not lawyers only here, is kind of falls into two very generalized buckets, one of which is creating social opportunities for people to interact with each other, whether it's virtual through sort of like a contest, or whether it's actually in person through some sort of happy hour or lunch. And the other sort of generalized bucket is having outside speakers come in and talk about situations and, considerations around well-being, how we interact with our workplace, how we keep it a healthy workplace. And one of the things that I think we're seeing, and which I hope will increase in magnitude and persist, is that it's this kind of thing that I think has the biggest impact over the long term on people's view of efforts towards well-being, because a lot of this is in changing the perception of what lawyer well-being is, why it's important, how it's important. And I know, Mala and Heidi, one of the things I've said to you in the past is sometimes I have to look at people and say, I don't know how to tell you that you should just care about your colleagues and their well-being, because if you don't, you don't. But law firms don't make anything. We don't make anything. We don't make widgets. We don't make items. And so a law firm's biggest assets and commercial revenue generators walk out the door every day. And if they're not happy and you're not doing a good job of responding to concerns and creating an environment in which they can thrive and grow and learn and be the best version of the lawyer or paralegal or staff member that they are, there's a day that they're not going to walk back in. And so if you don't care about it because you just want your colleagues to be in the best possible place that they can be, care about it because ultimately it will impact your bottom line. And I truly do believe that. And I'm proud to be at a firm that I think takes that really seriously. And we don't have the right answer yet. I don't think anyone has the perfect answer. And conversations like this are really important in sort of assessing and kind of doing a check-in to see if there are new things that people have realized might work and how they can be implemented in your environment.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's really what I think we're all trying to do, right? Is trickle a lot of this into everything that we're doing, into every discussion, into every sort of conference, into every meeting. I mean, I've seen different meetings of firms where there's just a little piece that hits on well-being, right? And so this is, it's absolutely, it's an essential element of lawyering, and that's what we're trying to actually teach these students who are in law school, is that you've got to take care of yourself. You've got to think about, how you're going to thrive as an attorney, and how you're going to interact with others as well, because that's going to impact you and certainly impact their well-being as well. So definitely appreciate all those fantastic messages. I do want to wrap up with a couple of resources and maybe some action items for everyone, which is one, we referenced resources, and we referenced Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers as a resource in Massachusetts. Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers is a free and confidential organization that provides mental health counseling, addiction recovery. They have practice management advisors. They also have a number of groups that they run, for example, for ADHD and solo practitioners. And so, definitely take advantage of them. They're also really great in advising people in terms of, if there's someone struggling, or you're worried about a colleague, you can call them and ask them for advice on how to deal with that, how to best approach someone. So they're really a fantastic resource, again, free and confidential. And then finally, I'm always trying to build this movement by creating sort of more, bringing more people to it, and creating ambassadors, is how I see it, in terms of spreading the message, spreading this awareness, and doing things in your own workplaces to make the necessary changes. And so, I do want to leave you with some questions that I hope that you will think about as a result of this program, which is, what can you do to create a supportive work environment for you and those around you? How can you be a resource for others? Is it by providing mentorship, or maybe it's just, listening, having an open door or open Zoom room? How do you lead by example? And one suggestion is actually taking your vacation, right? If you're working with a partner or supervisor, right, who never takes any vacation, it is unlikely you're going to take any vacation either. Telling stories of your own challenges and resilience, and maybe mistakes that you've made. How can you create policies that will, address inequities and encourage well-being? Think about whether those policies are actually rewarding behavior that has a negative impact on well-being. And I actually put one of those in the Q&A, which would be bonuses being tied to billable hours. That's one. And then thinking about, how do you establish boundaries, practice self-care, and all of those important habits. And obviously you can't do them all at once, but if you can pick one, stick with it for a little while, I think that's gonna help you. So I know we're right at the end here, but I want to give both Kendra and Mala the chance to, if you would like to say anything, just to wrap things up, any last tips or words of advice. Kendra, I'll start with you, and then I'll go to Mala.
I want to say, I don't know exactly who's on right now, but I'm here. I'm happy to talk to anyone. I'm happy to answer questions or continue this conversation offline, to bat around ideas. I want to thank everyone who participated today, and Heidi and Social Law Library for elevating this topic and shining a light on it, because I think it's important. And I think the only way it will get the traction it needs is if we just keep having this conversation. If we normalize having these conversations and making them part of what we should be doing in our day-to-day and overall lives as lawyers, I believe it will get better.
And I'm a resource. I'm always available as well. So please reach out. And I will just note that also that this bar is making strides towards well-being. We've got a leader of the Mass Bar Association, the Mass Academy of Trial Lawyers, all of whom have made lawyer well-being their priorities this year. So there are many, many people out there that want to help, and that you can reach out to. And I know that Kendra, Heidi, and I are definitely there for you. So I hope you do reach out and spread the word. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm just putting up the website here at the end, Mike. So this
Great.
is the SJC Standing Committee website, and we have a lot of resources available here. So again, Mike, thank you for having us, and thank you to the Social Library.
Thank you all.
so
Really, it
much.
was really wonderful to have you. I'm looking forward to continuing the series. We are planning on November 8th and December 13th, right, Heidi? So we'll get those programs put together and get them out there so you'll know about them. And thank you all and have a great day. Thank you.
You too. Bye, everyone.
Good afternoon.